Good afternoon. Today is the 15th of June, 2016. I'm Daryl Peterson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Palm Springs, California. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in the world's conflicts, I guess, was especially World War II. And today we are very honored to have Annette Frimtzis with us and Mr. Robert Frimtzis, who was a Russian boy who survived World War II and ended up in a displaced person camp and came to America and has been very successful in the aerospace industry. Start off by giving us your full name and spelling it and telling us where and when you were born.
My name is Robert Frimtzis. I don't think I have to spell Robert, but I certainly will spell Frimtzis.
Okay.
It's F like in Frank, R-I, M like in Mary, T like in Tom, Z like in zebra, I-S.
And where were you born?
I was born, actually I was born in the Ukraine, in a town called Mogilев-Podolsk. But my life was really spent, my early life was spent in a city of Belts, and what was at that time Bessarabia. It is now the Independent Republic of Moldova. As the history of that part of the world goes, the name Belts and the spelling depends on what I normally like to say as to who was in charge at the time.
Yes.
Because the region Bessarabia or Moldova is between two, it's a sliver of land running north to south. On the west, there's the river Prut, and on the west side of the Prut is Romania. On the east is the river Dniester, and on the right side of the river is Ukraine. So my folks and the family came from that region. Actually, on the river itself is that city, Mogilев-Podolsk, and across the river on the other side is a small town called Ataki, where my grandparents on my dad's side ended up living. As the history goes, because of the Tsarist time and prior to that, the difficult lives in there made people run, made people migrate, and they migrated as far as they could from the center, from Moscow and from the Soviets, and prior to the Soviets from the Tsar and so on. I mean, my understanding was that the young people had to subscribe into the military for 25 years. And so that was enough reason, to run away from that. So my folks basically settled in Bessarabia in the city Belts. That's the northern region. Yeah.
And how big a town was that?
That the Belts is at that time was somewhere around 100,000, under 100,000.
Okay.
The capital of Moldova is Chisinau, which is maybe 100 miles south of it, which is at that time was around maybe 300,000 population.
This was in the early 30s?
In the early 30s, right, yeah.
And you were born in
And I was
31.
born in 1930.
30.
I was born in 1930. And furthermore, that region was always Russian. When I say always, Peter the Great of Russia at the time established his military garrison in Belts. it was a little nothing at the time, but that's sort of what started growing it. And it formerly was taken adjacent, or I can't say occupied. It was really became part of Russia, as in 1818, and since that it was always Russia. Now comes let's go a little bit forward, just for the sake of history here, and the 1918 revolution. Romania, who was just adjacent to it, west of it, came and occupied that region, which is now Moldova, Bessarabia at the time, without firing a single shell. So when I lived there, I mean, I was under Romanian occupation. I mean, we were always considering ourselves Russian. In fact, I'll go on and tell you a little bit about it. My dad was a white-collar worker. The highest rank he's ever achieved was a director of credit in our bank, in our local bank. And my mom obviously never worked, and in fact, it was those days, it was a shame for a woman to have to work. Shame for the family, like, can't your father support you, or can't your husband support you? Type of thing at that time.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
I did not have brothers and sisters, and that was lucky, as you'll see as the story unfolds. On my dad's side, the parents, as I said, settled in Ataki, and I think at his younger age he was a fisherman. But when I knew him, he was retired with a long beard, and all he was doing is basically sitting and reading the Bible. And
so he was Christian?
No, he was Jewish. We were all Jewish.
Okay.
And as a child, I remember asking him, "Why you keep on reading? Every time I look at you, read that same book." I mean, like, haven't you learned it yet? You know, type of thing. Without really understanding that, I mean, they're really, philosophizing and studying and all that, you know, the Torah and all these books. And to me, it was all one, right? Didn't know anything about it. On my mom's side, who lived in Belz, her dad in his youth was a blacksmith. And he'd be going from village to village, I guess, in the local villages, and fixing, I guess, rims, wheels, horseshoes, and whatever blacksmith do in those days.
So was it a farming area or mountainous or what?
No, it was a fairly flat area. Bessarabia was well known for agriculture. It had the finest produce and the finest fruit, and due to, I guess, its climate or whatever conditions, finest cheeses. They had the finest, let's see, sheep at the time, because they also have the not just the milk products, but also those what they called karakul sheep, which are with the fine skins. You know, like Georgian skins, you know, and so on, that were quite expensive and so on. So as my grandfather matured and got married and so on, and accumulated wealth, he obviously no longer did that, and he bought a restaurant. I would call it more an inn, or what is the right word in that? A pub, or you know, there was not much food, so mostly cold food, maybe a soup or so, but mainly drinks and so on. And primarily the peasants, the villagers would be coming in that knew him for years, and would park their horses and wagons in our backyard. We had a large backyard, and drink and eat and sell their wares in town on the market. So So he became well-to-do, and he built his house. In the front of the house was that one room, that so-called inn or bar. Next to it, he built another house, identical house next to it, where we lived. Then he built another house. The intent was to you have children, you ought to do as much as you can for your children, and so on. And I'll diverse a little bit in there, saying something about my mom. Those days, marriages were by a intermediary, by what is the Shatchen, a matchmaker, right? And so I remember.
Dave, is this right?
Yeah, we're going a little bit closer.
I remember my mom telling me the story that when they were bringing matches for her, the matchmaker would refer to her, and I think it's important to understand the region, and good wine and a bad barrel. The connotation was that her father used to be a blacksmith, which is, not exactly royalty, or, especially those days, so that's why I'm saying it as an anecdote to realize the times that she was going through at the time,
And what was her name? And your
her name was Sophie, or we called her Sonia, but registered as Sophia, Sonia.
And your father's
And my father's name was Grigory, Grisha.
good Russian names.
Right. And let me go on. My early recollection basically starts off at the age of 5. And that's sort of the time when you leave the shelter of your home with your parents. By leave, I mean you start wandering out and start playing with kids outdoors, and to my big surprise, none of the children, none of our neighbors understood me. I spoke only Russian. I then realized that we lived pretty much in a exclusively Jewish neighborhood.
Everybody spoke Hebrew.
Everybody spoke Yiddish in those days, right? To my big surprise, we were in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. And the next surprise was at that age, you go to kindergarten. It wasn't really a surprise, I knew that, but they spoke only Romanian. Well, of course, I did not speak a single word of Romanian. So in the book that I've written, I started off saying that at the age of 5, I was a foreigner in my own country, and little did I realize that I'll remain a foreigner for many years to come, with all its implications, all of which are negative, obviously. And to give you a bit of an explanation now as to, my dad believed in the intelligentsia and in the, so consequently he did not want me to speak Yiddish, to learn Yiddish, and he did not want me to go to Yiddish school and the like. Till, of course, when I reached 5, 6, my grandfather's influence was next door, got, sort of prevailed, but again, at home, we always spoke only Russian. And then, of course, I learned Yiddish, but at home, I was always Russian. He was a very strict disciplinarian, and I did not have a good life with him till the very end. I mean, because of his attitude,
Tell me a little bit about the school system there. We have a certain system there.
Sure.
What was different? Was it a state-run operation? Or?
Well, yeah, the schools were state schools. My understanding was There might have been some private schools also, but I really wasn't aware of it. They were all state schools. And you start off with, it's basically a 4 plus 8, plus kindergarten.
Okay.
And then you go to university or college. The Soviets had a separate, which to my surprise, I'll go into that later. They had a 10-year from beginning to end, and then you go to college. And they refer to it as a deschiletka, meaning a 10-year. It's one word, a 10-year, type of thing. And so I went to school there, and so consequently, because of my dad's upbringing and all that, we always considered ourselves Russian. I mean, we were Jewish, of course, but I mean, we were not Romanian. We did not like being under Romanian so-called occupation, if you will, at the time, and the rules and so on.
So did you go to temple on the Sabbath?
Of course. No, I never went, no. What, as a compromise, what my dad agreed to with Grandpa is that he hired a rabbi, which is basically a teacher, to come to the house twice a week and sit down with me and teach me the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and start on the prayers. Well, as time goes on, you'll realize now this was around the age of 6 or so. To step ahead, on June 28, 1940, we walk up to a no. June 28, 1940 is when Russia came in. We walk up to June 22nd. Go back. June 28, June 28, 1940. We woke up in the morning to a big surprise, a great parade, courtesy of the Red Army.
Wow.
They just walked in and took over Bessarabia, took over our region.
So let's see, when did Germany and
I'll go on to that,
okay.
right. I'll go on to that. So here we are, I am at that time, I'm 8 going on 9, years old, and I'm extremely delighted, to see the Russian army, the Red Almighty Army coming in. I'll be able to speak my language, the language of my ancestors, and belongs to a huge, big, important, strong country. Well, that pride and the happiness lasted for, I believe, less than a month. Within a month, we started realizing what it means to live under the Soviet domination, under the Soviet freedom. First of all, we're all equal, we're all Soviet citizens. Immediately, they gave us Russian passports. My uncle, my mother's brother, the youngest brother, was the pride of the family. He was a doctor, he was an MD, a young doctor. Well, they gave him a special passport, they refer to it as paragraph 39, i.e., an undesirable.
Oh.
In other words, he's a capitalist.
That's because
He didn't even have any people working for him. He didn't even have any employees or anything. But that's sort of what started us understanding the Soviet system. My grandfather, together with, let me sort of step back a little bit, our whole street, when I wrote the book, I remembered, fortunately, my mom lived with me and she lived to be 93. And so I remembered basically the whole town with the names of the people and their occupations. Predominantly, they were all small businesses, you know, a grocery, a restaurant, a store for a feed store for horses, a pharmacy, you know, the whole, you know, street. Well, every single one of them was hit up with such severe taxes that they all closed. And that was basically, hey, guess what? It worked. That was the purpose, the intent of the Soviet Union doing that, because everything belongs to the state, and whatever runs by the state, and no private property. So that started showing me as to what it is, and the parents. Also, food started this. I mean, we had plenty of everything, plenty of clothing, plenty. They were hoarding everything and sending it to the interior, which tells us again what kind of regime, you know, we were in.
So
Yes?
was this takeover a planned thing, or did they? When did what made them Russians decide to come
Well,
into the?
I mean, if you look at the history as to what happened is in 1939, you know, the Nazis, you know, attacked France, attacked Holland, attacked, and the Russians split at that time. They made a pact with Hitler, and they split Poland. Half of it to be the eastern part to become under Russia, and the western part to become under Germany. And of course, 1940 they attacked us. So they slowly, at that time they came in, they took us over. They also took over Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. So all these countries that are with the bordering country, the most western part of their border, they've just increased their border. They just took
So
over
they're
that territory.
making it harder for the Germans to get to the
Well,
motherland.
there wasn't even at that time, I mean, they were a pact with Germans. But the point was that it's a great Russia. And indeed, they had people like us, and I don't know whether we were the majority, but we were probably 50-50. And the region where we lived were Russian speaking, and there were others were Moldovan or Romanian or, you know, and so on. So they used that as a pretext or whatever, you know. So they just came and occupied it.
So was it a particularly anti-Semitic types of activities?
At
the
that
Russians
time, no, we didn't really realize any. We didn't. We just realized what the Soviet regime means. That what yours is mine and what mine is mine, type of thing. You know. In fact, you don't have anything. You know. And when I speak normally, I tell the American people, I tell our folks, how fortunate we are, and how little do you understand, fortunately, as to how to appreciate America, how much to appreciate America. And I try to draw these contrasts specifically for it, you know, that's the reason I'm saying it, you know. So that's as far as the Soviets are concerned. No, there was not much anti-Semitism. That just everybody lost their jobs and whatever. And you know, in fact, my dad, you know, I think he got his best position at the time, you know, in the local bank. You know, prior to that, he worked in the other offices and you know, all kind of, you know, stuff that he was doing. So we were actually worried that my uncle, the youngest, you know, will be sent to Siberia eventually, you know. Well, now we wish that would have happened, of course. Now, forward to June 22nd, 1941,
What happened?
when 1940 is when the Soviets, when the Nazi occupied us. So the other one was a year later, a year earlier. In other words, the Russians occupied our region on June 28, and this happened on June 22nd. So it's a year minus a week, minus 6 days or something like that, you know. And so we woke up at 4 in the morning. There's some rumbling and some noises and some earth shaking. And it so happened that a year earlier, just about a year earlier, we had the only earthquake that I remember in our region. And at the time, and that happened, you know, think of it, June 22nd, the middle of the summer, beginning of the summer, it's nice and warm. And so what do people do? I mean, and it's still dark outside, so people just run outside for fear that the house might fall in on you, and try to stay away from the wires, you know, for electric wires and so on. And so that's what we've done. Well, we've repeated the same thing this time, in pajamas and barefoot and whatever, you know, whatever you sleep in. And we were, you know, you chat and you say, well, it must be another earthquake, or and as it started getting lighter and lighter, I've noticed, you know, 3 dots in the sky, and some noises, and then I've witnessed a dogfight, and you know, in the sky, and even then we were sort of looking at it and saying, well, I guess these might be exercises the Soviets are preparing for the invasion of Germany, you know. Well, only about an hour later, a tremendous explosion, tremendous shaking, and half of the city got covered in black smoke. It turned out that they managed to hit a direct hit on the fuel tanks and the depots and the airport, which is outside of town. The Soviets have built.
So by this time,
By this time, we say, hey, this must be the real thing.
But it's a pretty mechanized society by then. You had cars and tractors and things like that.
What do you mean?
Well, in the normal day-to-day activities.
Well, the normal day-to-day activities,
cars.
well, I mean, there was not much activity. The only thing we have seen is after that big explosion is trucks running from the airport covered with branches and so on, and we've seen some blood dripping and so on. So they must have had a mess at the airport. And prior to that, we've seen it had happened on a Sunday. So all the officers, everybody was pretty much in town. And as we found out later, there was really a conspiracy. The whole thing was well pre-planned. Most of the heavy armament was dismantled for cleaning and who knows what. And of course the Nazis kept on, you know, that's what gave them all that power. Later we realized that the reason they're advancing is whole battalions, including the generals of Ukrainians, which were in the Red Army, as well as Belarusians, the White Army, it's called the Red Army, but Belarusia means white Russia. Bela is white, you know. Your hair is Bela. Right, so they came and they joined with the Nazis. And we realized that, and maybe I'm sure they realized later on also that that was not exactly a very smart thing to do. But I think that the reason they've done it is they thought that that's the only way they can get rid of the Soviet regime. Finally get out of that, you know. Well, by 12 noon, we first heard Molotov, which was the foreign minister, Vyacheslav Mikhailovich Molotov, going on the radio, and telling us that we were attacked by the Nazis. And every day,
State of war then?
right, we were state of war, and every day we had bombardments, just one plane here and there. And about 3 days later, it must be the 25th or the 26th, around 5 or so, maybe 6 in the afternoon, because it's summer, you know, it's light till about 8. A plane flew in and dropped a bomb less than a block from our house. And I remember I was playing outside at the time, and I remember I'm 10 years old. I mean, put it all in that perspective. I mean, I'm 10 years old.
10 for mommy.
And so I started hollering, and at that, of course, my mom heard it also, and my dad, so we all ran out. And then I seen my grandma ran out next door, and everybody ran just about several blocks away from where we lived. Became a sort of sparsely populated area with predominantly Polish population and so on. So we ran in there and said, oh, the Nazis are not going to go bomb there for 2 reasons. There are no Jews. The second one, there's nothing really to bomb there, you know. And we were right. So we were watched the whole night in horror how our city went up in smoke. We couldn't see our house exactly because we were 4 or 5 blocks away, but we've seen that horrible smoke. And my eyes were burning, and what was coming off the sky, you know. As soon as we got there, my dad says, I'm gonna go back and see where I can get something out of the house. Remember, the bomb fell about a block away, less than a block. And my mom says, you're nuts, why you go? No, I'm gonna go. So he went, and it's 5 blocks to run, it's just a couple of minutes, and it took maybe, well, it really didn't take that long, but we thought it's forever. Till we finally seen him coming back carrying what he did, he managed to do was take the white sheets from the bed and threw whatever he could, you know, into it, whatever he could carry, you know. And my uncle, another uncle, helped him carry a rug. You know, so, and he was all black, and his face was black, and then the white sheet was black from, you know, from the sun and from.
So these were mainly wood frame buildings then?
No, they were
bricks? Or?
They were sort of, the outside was stucco, and I believe inside was sort of the man-made brick, maybe, you know, the type, you know, I don't think it was wood. Okay. I'm not sure, but I don't think. The wood, the floor, the roof was of shingle, heavy shingle. The floor, of course, was wood, you know.
Okay. So that's what was...
Right. The windows and doors and everything else. And fences, everything was made out of wood. So, come morning, the rest of the family, sort of whoever came also by then, you know, and the horror of watching and people crying and calling out names, and of course there were already victims, there were already dead people, there were already wounded people, and so. First thing in the morning, the family sort of got together, whoever was there. The doctor came in, he was in town, he was manning the hospital. And so on, so he came just to see what happened, and he couldn't believe that our home, everything was destroyed, that he was all black when he came in. And no sooner did they come in, that there was again a wounded person. So he was a young man, a strong man, and asked somebody else. They pulled off a door from a barn, and they put him and he ran, to give him first aid. So we hardly saw him, he was very dedicated. So my dad stood up and said, look, I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting out of here. And the reason is, when you look at the map, and I had several maps, not this here, this is not going to show you. In the book I have some maps. Excuse me, I want to maybe stop for a second so I can get some water.
Yeah, I think we have.
Do you want to stop the
No, this.
no,
Here.
Oh, is that
yeah.
Oh,
Is it cold? Oh,
this,
okay.
Dave will edit this out.
That's fine, yeah, thank you. So he made a point that we were 50 kilometers from the Romanian border. I mean, the whole region was maybe 120 kilometers or so wide, and it was maybe 700 or 800 long, So he says, and Romania is an ally of the Nazis, part of the Axis at the time, what they called.
So which way did you want to
So
go?
which way are you going to run? East. Because the front comes from the west.
So you didn't want to be with the Germans.
No, we did not know at the time from Auschwitz, we did not know from those things, but we knew the reputation of Hitler and the Nazis and what they did to what they did to everybody, pretty much.
Pogroms and
Right, and so on, right. So, so the intent is to go east. And that's sort of what started off, We started going east, and first he was able to get to hire a local guy that you knew that had a horse and buggy, and took us over to go, when you go east, you gotta go to the river towards Ukraine. And that's where his parents were, my dad's parents were, to see if they're alive, we'll take them with us, let's run. Well, by the time we got there, I mean, they were already gone. I mean, they ran across the river into Ukraine. I mean, they weren't sitting and waiting. They had the same idea. Well, unfortunately, they all died. They all were killed by the Nazis because they couldn't run, We never met them. We never met up with them.
So the front came.
And the front kept on moving eastward, and we kept on moving eastward. And it's interesting that we were, like, in many instances, a day or 2 days ahead of them. As we'd leave a village, we'd find out that they occupied a village. And the way...
How many were you?
Well, there was the three of us.
Just the
Oh,
three?
no, just the three of us. The rest of them...
Your grandfather was...
My grandfather died as soon as he saw the taxes. And we always felt that he died for fear that he'll spend his old age in jail. Because who could pay for this guy?
You're down to
right,
you and your mom and dad.
Right, me, mom, and dad.
And how do you travel? Is it all by wagon?
Well,
horse,
no,
wagon?
by foot. So first we did there, we went there, and this guy goes back, and you go by foot. So we found another neighbor who had a horse and wagon. So he let us first put that bundle that we had, and we'd walk, and I wouldn't let us, not even my mom. Sometimes he'd let my mom sit in the carriage for a while or so, a wagon, not a carriage,
Mm-hmm.
And the way it happened is my dad, who was, he was well read. I remember as a child, he was showing me maps and how the Maginot Line fell and how the Nazis took over France and the Maginot Line. I mean, that was impenetrable supposedly, and so on. I mean, didn't mean a thing at the time, and so. So we kept on moving from early morning to late night in rain and shine, and I was just wearing a pair of shorts. I had a pair of sandals, but I tried to preserve them. And a shirt, I tried to preserve it, and that's it. I just walked from early morning to late night, eating whatever we could forage, whatever we could bargain, whatever we could. And I remember I wrote in the book that I'll never forget is that, let me step a little backward. Every time we were attacked, as you go, I mean, you walk and it's just not the three of you. Then there's other people that are walking. So it ends up like a line, like a caravan, by foot, by horse, by anything, you know. And when I've seen the Bosnia war, you know, many years later, I relived it all. I couldn't sleep at night. And the only difference was that, yeah, they had cars and they had, you know, and they had the United Nations come in and intervene, and, you know, which we did not have at the time. So as we were bombed every day, and at the beginning we were bombed, and the plane, we weren't a major target, but the plane was passed by and sees a group of people. It'd come down, you know, and just straight with a machine gun. And again, and there's dead people, there's wounded people. We run, you hide under a bush, under a whatever, you know. So every time that happened maybe 2,000 times in the beginning. And every time my mom stood me up after the first time and says, I want you to make me a promise, a solemn promise, to write a book, to tell the world what happened to innocent people so it would never be repeated again. Mom, but first we gotta survive, yes, you know. The attitude, what she had in her mind at the time, you know, is amazing, because we did not know, you know, what happened to 6 million Jews after that, you know. So we sort of said, like, why us? I mean, we're innocent, what do we do? You know, that thing, you know. So we kept on going and sleeping wherever you sleep at night. And
were you able to gather some covers or
no, dirt on the dirt or on the grass or whatever, or under a tree. And then we also realized that you know, if night fell and we were nearby a village, we'd keep on going. We want to make sure we're not staying over near the village for fear. Excuse me. That the locals would kill us at night, you know. And to give you an example, they did not like, and it's not just because Jewish, but I mean, just did not like the people trampling by and going by. And they were waiting for the Nazis to come, and they were hoping that they'll have their saviors, you know.
So what country did you enter next then?
So let me just tell you a brief episode. So what do you do for food? I mean, you're just starving, you're dying, you know. So my dad, when he saved whatever he managed to save, a suit of clothes of his. So he was begging, and he finally bartered with a woman to give him a loaf of bread for the suit, a new suit. And she told him, I'll never forget it, it's too nice of me, as is, to do that. Because all I have to do is wait for tomorrow. I'll have your suit and the bread, because the Nazis are around the corner. I mean, that was the attitude, you know, the reception that we had. And then you could, whatever you see, an apple you'd steal or whatever. And then, later on, we managed to, and my dad actually went from the large villages, he'd look up at the map, and he'd lay out a route to stay away from railroads and stay away from big cities, because those were targets. Those were actually military targets.
Was there a hope of getting to some certain place, or just playing it by ear and hopefully finding something?
The hope is to survive every day and to stay ahead of the Nazis. And guess what? We did. And later on, again, being that everything belongs to the government, we stopped off at one of the larger villages where my dad looked up at the map again, routed out. And my mom started begging and crying and so on. I can't walk anymore. I'm going to die. Lie down here and so on. Can't you give me a horse and a wagon? Because that's the government's. It's not theirs, you know. It's not. It's basically the kolkhoz, you know, which is the the association, of farmers. Doesn't belong to anyone.
Well,
So indeed, she succeeded, and they gave us a couple of horses that were practically dead and a wagon that was falling apart. So we managed to do this for a while. I'll give you a brief episode. Is while so it's a dark, very humid night. My folks fell asleep on the wagon, and I remember that wagon was with these big, that you carry hay in. It turned out it had wooden axles. I really knew nothing about it. And anything is good. Then the axle broke, and that was the end of it. So I'm pulling ahead, and I'm pulling over, to a side, and being that there was no more room, in there, I just dark, completely dark. I mean, pitch black. And I sort of felt something elevated, so I lie down on that. As the sun came, I guess before the sun came up, I wake up to terrible screams, my mom, my God, look where you are. I was lying at at the cemetery, a freshly dug grave.
oh,
When it happened, at that time I had hair, it stood up. I mean, things that,
yeah.
So to make it short, time goes on, we're starving, the horses are starving, the wagon broke down. Against the best of my dad's judgment, the only thing we can do is take the railroad and go, or else we'll never make it. And how do you take a railroad? You go to the railroad station to buy a ticket. No. You go to any rails that you see and watch for any train that's going to go by, and hopefully you can hop on. And as you go along those, you hopefully go until it goes up a hill, so it's going to slow down a bit. And that's what we've done. And we've been on all kind of open cars and platforms, and with horses and with pigs and with you name it. So we went
is
on.
there danger too of being?
Of course, and we were
Arrested
bound
or-
constantly. And I describe an episode. And it's really, I read it now and I say how hair raising. You're in a closed car, in a what do you call it? A
Boxcar?
boxcar, right? Yeah. And it's, no room in there. It's stuff. We're standing up. Everybody's standing up.
Oh, boy. So it was.
And you hear bombardment, and everybody starts panicking. Open the door, and then the other guy says, "No, don't open the door." And on, and the train slows down, and eventually, we all pile out, and around, and again, and then people kills people here and there, and somehow we survived, And then the train takes off, and without letting you know, so then you run after the train to catch up with it, and so, it's hard. At one point, we were supposed to change trains because we changed them as long as the train deviates from going east, we don't want to be on it. So we stopped at a stop just, again, at night, dark. So we stopped at a stop before that, and we assumed that's the stop. So as we started dropping off, by that time, we took that bundle and we put it into 3 little bundles so each one can carry some, So we dropped the 2 bundles, and no, we dropped 1 bundle, and my mom went down, and my dad went down, and the train takes off. So I wanted to drop the rest of it and come down. No, you stay. We're gonna meet you at the next stop. Well, the next stop was indeed, the station that we were supposed to be. So I described, here I am, a 10-year-old in a place I've never been in my life, and here I have 2 bags. I have mine and the one that weren't able to drop. And my first thought is, how do I make sure that they don't steal it? Don't take it away, steal it. They can just take it away from me. How can I fight, at that age, And I described how I moved over sort of, and I kept on asking, look, and I told my story. Oh, don't worry, stay here, your parents will come. And by 12 noon, they came.
Oh.
So I spent the night with half a day in horror. I had to go to the bathroom. I described an episode. What do? Do I leave these bags and all I knew is we want to go to Tajikistan. We want to go to, because my mom had an aunt who lived there. How did she live in Tajikistan? Well, she was in Ukraine. She wasn't in Bessarabia before the Soviets. Her husband had a oil press. Consequently, he was a capitalist, right? They sent them there. So they were there for years, you know. In other words, they were. So we knew, we didn't even know whether she's alive or she's not alive, but that was the destination. We said, well, we might as well go there.
Little glimmer of hope.
Right.
Yeah.
So we kept on going, and eventually, you know, so we covered. I guess I can show you the map now, if you will. I don't know whether it'll show. Yeah. The map will show. Can you see it there? Is it showing?
No.
No?
It's going to cover your face.
Yeah, well, that covers the face. I'm just
Okay. That's
so
good.
basically,
Right?
what we
Right.
covered, can you see it on there? Do they know? Do they
Yes. Yes.
see it? Right, the camera see it.
Well, this was smaller than the picture's going to be eventually. Okay, there. Hold it up a little more. Okay, so I can read Ukraine over here.
Okay, right.
And
So I want to show you that we went from the westernmost part of the Soviet Empire, which I referred to, all the way to the east, over 3.5 months, close to 4 months, and we ended up in Tajikistan. And this is,
And your path is this?
well,
line?
no, the path was, on the way back, that was my path.
Oh, okay.
But over there, the path, who knows? So that's sort of what we ended up doing.
Okay.
And when I said at the end of the world, east of Tajikistan, I know you can see it there, is China. It borders with China. I wonder what the camera sees. You know, that's,
Yeah.
maybe you can keep it.
Yeah. We can.
So
see
it's
that.
China. South of Afghanistan, south of Tajikistan is Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we all know what Afghanistan is like. So I just try to show the kind of trip that we made.
So Tajikistan is more. Is it all desert too, or is it?
Well, it is very mountainous.
Oh, okay.
It's very mountainous. It's the tallest mountains, the Pamir Mountains are there, yeah. So it's next to China, and so we went. I described how we went through to Uzbekistan first, you know, and you sleep on the street. You wait for a train to. Yeah.
So was that an independent country still then, or was
No,
that
no,
part of
no.
Russia?
These are all Soviet republics.
Okay. Yeah.
They're all Soviet republics
Up till.
up till Stalin's demise.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So that was right. There was Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, all these stands. These are all Muslim countries
In Russia.
in Russia, occupied by Russia at the time. You know.
Okay.
So okay, let's go on. I guess it takes a lot of time.
I don't mind. This
Well,
is worth the time.
my wife has got a
Oh.
what she got? 3 o'clock or something? Or-
3:45,
yeah. So.
and
yeah.
we're on cook.
Yeah, okay. So I'll yeah, there's enough time. Normally what I do is I take an hour, you know, to do it without interruptions, since I have my own routine. So no, that's fine. I mean, I don't mind it. So coming to Tajikistan, well, the capital of Tajikistan at the time was Stalinabad.
I can't spell that.
Yeah, well, Stalin Abad, yeah, Stalin, yeah.
Yeah.
And all these Muslims had Abad, you know. There was a Lenin Abad and a Stalin Abad and all kind of, right. So
Did you find the relative?
Well, here's the capital city, some beautiful buildings. So, and then we finally have the address, and we're trying to get there. And these were just buildings, government buildings. And a nice park. It comes to the residences, mud huts. And I defined the book, what's a mud hut? If the roof is made out of mud, and the floor is made out of mud, and the walls are made out of mud, it's got to be a mud hut. I say, no running water, no electricity, not even an outhouse in the vicinity. I mean, nature does what nature has to do.
Yeah.
I mean, how primitive. And obviously now people have seen Uzbekistan, have seen, let's see, where are we fighting now?
Iran,
and
Syria.
No. In Afghanistan, in Afghanistan, you see sort of pictures of it, mud huts. Imagine what we were 70 years earlier than that. I mean, it's just impossible. My mom went to work immediately. She never worked a day in her life. I went to school. I'll give you a brief episode. I went to 6th grade at the time,
And
I told you it's a 10-year grade,
They were speaking Russian?
Of course, right.
Okay.
Speaks Russian, right. And here I am, I'm blue eyes, at the time blonde hair. My mother tongue is Russian. And I come in, and the first week during lunch break, about 10 guys much larger than me jumped me and beat the daylights out of me. And they called me a dirty Jew. The reason I'm saying it is here, and it took me a week to recuperate to get back to school. And I write in the book that I had more pain inside than from the wounds. How is that possible in a country where the Constitution says that we're all equal? Now, had it been the Nazis, well, I can understand that. I don't like it, but I understand that. But not in the Soviet Union. A little more to understand what it means to live in the Soviet Union, You were asking earlier about anti-Semitism. And so I stayed the 6th grade and the 7th grade. At the age of 12, in the middle of the school, Mom managed to get me a job. My first full-time job as a helper to an electrician in the area where she worked. She worked at a sanitary institute, a bacteriological institute, in town. So what that provided me is, instead of 600 grams of bread, 800 grams of bread. Instead of 400 grams of bread, 600 grams of bread. And 400 grams of bread, I mean, the bread was like a wet brick. I mean, I assure you that I don't eat 400 grams of bread a day here, or maybe in a week, but there's nothing else. And it's like a brick, it's like 2 slices, And the 600 is 3 slices, well, but it's,
Dark.
It's 50% more,
Brown bread.
And, and it's sour and wet, so the first, within 6 months, I managed to install electricity in a mud hut. And ours was the only mud hut with electricity for as far as the eye can see. And I installed it. I made a little hot plate, so to cook with, and so on. So life improved a bit, I don't know. Maybe I should show you. I have 2 pictures. Annette, you want to show the 2 pictures? The before and after. That they're there, Well, you have them, though. Right. I just wanted to show you a picture. Here is a. Let's see.
12
No,
years old.
well, I was 11, I wasn't even 12 at the time, you know,
Okay.
because I was born in
Yeah.
September. Yeah, I mean, it looks like a prisoner of war, starving and so on.
That's what
And here
you-
is a year
that's
later,
what you
give me the
were.
next picture, that, here's a year later that I had 800 grams of bread, and I had a different attitude and a different feeling, and I wasn't as hungry as before, you know, and so on. I mean, just to show you the life in the Soviet Union. Also, at the same time, I must tell you that, I mean, these were the war years.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much America understands that the Soviets really carried the brunt of the war. You know, they lost 20 to 30 million people. My dad was immediately taken into the army as soon as we came there. And we didn't hear from him for about, I don't know, 6 months, 7 or 8. And we were just praying that he's still alive. And then we got a letter, maybe a year later or so, from a military hospital that he is lying wounded, that he was wounded in the battles of Stalingrad. Well, for those that don't know Stalingrad, the battles of Stalingrad lasted 7 months.
And there was
The Soviet lost 1.2 million people. The Nazis, the Nazis lost 500,000. That's Nazis plus Romanians plus Hungarians and so on. I think the Germans, lost 250,000. And that's when, you know, they surrendered, and Polish surrendered. It wasn't general, it was more than a general, than Field Marshal Polish. Right, and that's sort of what stopped really the aggression. And from then on, the Soviets managed to start occupying their territory back and so on. And came to in 1944, I guess, is when they freed our city. We decided to return. I mean, though we knew that there's nothing to return to, but I also knew that I don't want to live in Tajikistan, certainly not.
Yeah.
So again,
So did your father survive then? And
yeah, he survived, right?
Came back to you?
No, he survived, and he was still in the military.
Okay.
He was still in the military. So that's part of the story, you know. So on the way back, we stopped, and that's why you see on the picture here that we went. He was stationed in Saratov at the time. It's a big city on the Volga.
Oh, okay.
He was in the military. It was in the barracks, living there, and so we came and we spent a couple of months with him, and we went on our way back to continue to go home. And as soon as he was, let go from the army, he came back. Well, coming back. Why do you have to keep it that long? Yeah? Why do you keep it that long there? I mean, the map.
You're still talking about it. So
yeah.
Okay.
And keeping, once we got home, I mean, first of all, the trip back was, mainly on these boxcars and freezing, and it was cold, and not much to eat again, and so on. And we got back to the city, as we knew it was completely destroyed. Nowhere to find a place to live. Finally, my mom managed to find a room to share with another mother and boy, you know. And as soon as my dad came back, we said, look, we gotta leave. We gotta escape from the Soviet Union. This is not to live. And we knew what it means to escape from the Soviet Union, you know. So we went to another city called Chernovitz, that's in Ukraine. But the reason we went to Chernovitz is because that, prior to Russia's occupation and so on, that was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So there were a lot of, Germans and so on, and nobody knew us there. So we came there, we got an apartment, and quickly my dad made some bogus papers that we're Romanians. And armed with that, we crossed the border. And I remember my dad was shaking. And I write in the book, I say that had they detected that these are bogus papers, I mean, they'd shoot my dad on the spot. On us, they wouldn't waste a bullet. They just sent us back, not to Tajikistan, but to Siberia, which is much worse, you know. But all that, I'm just trying to, when I talk to people, when I brief people, I try to tell them the importance. We were willing to risk our life instead of staying in the Soviet Union. And that's a lesson for every American to know and to remember, and to bless America, and to think how fortunate we are living in America now. And I can't help but stress that, you know, stop and stress that. And
So what country did you escape to?
so we escaped to Romania.
Okay.
So we escaped back to Romania. Well, with the intent of going to America, because we had cousins still back, and my dad had cousins that he grew up with in America. Well, lo and behold, we can't go to America from Romania. Are you kidding? I'm not even sure there was even an American consul at that time, you know, in Romania.
Probably not.
So what we heard is that at best what you ought to be is in Italy. Well, we didn't have the money, we couldn't move, we didn't know how. So I joined so my parents, you know, stayed, and I said, look, I did not escape from Russia to live in Romania. It was the fascists who killed some of our people and so on. I describe in the book, we have 11 people, members of our family destroyed by the Nazis and their sympathizers. So I joined a group of youngsters. At that time, remember, I was already 15, 16. And so I joined a group of, 15 more like it, you know, of youngsters. In fact, I was the youngest, with the intent of going to Palestine on a clandestine ship. I mean, I'd much rather go to Palestine than be in Romania. I want to go to America, but looks like there's no way I can go to America. So I worked there for 6 months, and instead of, you know, so they promoted me, and I mean, it's a small group, and I showed pictures there, and they sent me to Bucharest for lessons, and when it finally came that they managed to get a couple of people, and they got a ship to get some people in, they called me in the office and said, not you. You are of more value here. So that's exactly how my facial expression was. I said, no way, goodbye. And I came back. By that time, my dad managed to earn some money. I think that he was selling some shoes at the railroad station to Russians again that were coming back, you know, again back from the war and so on, you know, back to speaking the language, you know, and so on. So he was able to do that. So armed with that, we got a couple of passports. We got 3 passports, Hungarian passports. I mean, next to Romania is Hungary. I mean, now we're going west. First we're going east, now we're going west. Next is Hungary. And
so these were kind of illegal passports?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, well, first I had to remember a name of a Hungarian name. He was dark, I was blonde. He was 25, I was 15. You know, 16 at the time, you know, 15, 16, yeah, something like that at the time. And the same with my parents and so on. And we got my dad paid somebody, you know, a guide, to take us across the border by foot on a dark, moonless night. And we crossed by foot, crossed the border. And again, the fear of being caught by the Romanians, being caught by the Hungarians, or the guide himself is going to kill you, and I don't know, because he doesn't exactly love you. And take whatever you got. We don't have much, you know, packets with us. And he was supposed to go with us. They were supposed to go with us all the way to to Budapest, and we came there and said, no. Came daylight, we crossed the border into Hungary. He says, you go, and he showed us what in fact, he came into a farmhouse, and the farmhouse took a horse and wagon and brought us over to the railroad station a couple of miles away from there. And we bought 3 tickets to Budapest. And he said it for us. I mean, we didn't even know, how to do it, And armed with that, we got into the train. My dad had a watch at the time, and he told us specifically, if I were you, I'd take off the watch. He says, why? He says, you're in the train, somebody comes over and asks you, what time is it? You're cooked, you're dead. You didn't understand what he's asking, you don't know how to answer, and the police is all over. So, I mean, we, most of the time, just pretended to sleep. So nobody would talk to us, we wouldn't, you know what I'm saying? And of course, the Russians come in with Hungarians and look at the passports. And my heart, I don't know, I'm surprised I still have a heart, because I thought at that time I lost it, He looks at the passport, he never looked at me. Looked at the 3 passports, put them away, and kept on walking. We come to the station, Budapest, full of police, Russian and Hungarian police. Who are they looking for? Guys like me, people like us. What do you do? Now, we were told somebody's going to pick you up. So first we got to get through the main gate. Budapest got a beautiful railroad station. And we separated, and I went, there were a couple of nuns went, and I sort of went with them. And anything, And we come, and I remember there was like a big fountain in front of the other side, outside. And we get together, 3 of us, and we say, what do you do? And I write in the book, I say, I wish I knew how to be a detective or went to detective school. What I mean by that is, how do you make yourself invisible to the police and at the same time visible to somebody that's supposed to pick you up without knowing who that somebody is?
Tough job.
And we're standing there and we're shivering, we don't, you don't know. And a truck passes by covered in with a tarp, right? Yeah. And it passes by, and he sort of slowed down, and he stopped, I don't know, sort of 100 feet away from there. And the young man runs out of there and comes over to my dad and asks him in Yiddish, do you speak Yiddish? And my dad said, yes, just follow me. I guess that must have been the signal.
That was it.
And he took us, it took us to Pest, and then to Buda. And then we waited at night, and another truck came, and they took us over and took us across the border into Austria. Because you got to go through Hungary, from Romania to Hungary to Austria to Italy. Okay.
So was it just the 3 of you, or was there?
The truck was loaded with people,
Okay.
and it was hot because of it was covered. It was pouring outside, I remember. People were, vomiting, and I mean from not feeling well from all that. And you don't want to say a word, you don't want it, the truck keeps on going. I remember coming to the border, and there was, I heard Russian speaking, and I heard, Hungarian speaking, and they opened up the tarp, and looked in, and there was one guy, the guy in the truck, in addition to the driver, there were 2 guys or 3 guys with a big truck, was dressed in a British uniform as a British soldier, but it also had the Star of David on it. Mm-hmm. So these were the Jewish brigade that from Palestine that fought alongside Britain, against the Nazis. Mm-hmm. So after the war, it looks like a bunch of them, I don't know how many, lucky for us, stayed there, and they stayed for purposes of helping refugees do whatever, you know. So I remember, how did I know? First I heard him speak Hebrew. Now, I don't speak Hebrew, but I can tell when somebody speaks Hebrew. So I knew that. Then he spoke, you know, English. And then he spoke Russian to the Russian guy, yeah. And he must have paid off or whatever, you know, and took us across the border. Come to Vienna. In Vienna, we stopped off for a while. And we said, we got to go to Italy. They told us the only way you can do is you got to go to Italy. And to get to Italy, you got to cross the tallest mountains in Europe, the Alps, by foot, mind you. Mm-hmm. Well, I had the distinct honor of having to do it twice. So we crossed the mountain, and I don't want to go in, you know, how tough it is. And my mom faints at the very top of it, and we thought we'll bury her there. Eventually, she made it. And we come to Italy, and it's all great, and we sleep on the ground. Italy, I mean, on the Italian side of the border, you know. And it's at night, and we sleep on the grass outside. Somebody gave us an American blanket, American Army blanket, so lie and sleep. And the sun comes out, and I feel somebody sticking me. You know, I look up. It's the Italian Carabinieri. And they line up all the youth in two rows and with a rifle, and they march us back. And they tell us in so many words that you come back and we shoot you. No sooner did they turn around, and it starts getting darker, than we started running backwards, you know. And I was wearing, all my possessions were 2 pair of pants. I wore one on top of the other. When I came to the other side again, I had holes through both of them, here and through behind, you know, through my knees, because of, you know, we were tumbling and running and doing anything just to get there in time. We got like midnight again. They're exhausted, you know.
So how old was your mother and father at this time?
They were sitting and waiting there. They were hoping. We found out that it's all a come on.
But
because
how old were they?
Oh, how old were they at the time? They were in their early 40s.
Okay. So
early 40s.
Still
Yeah.
prime
Yeah.
life, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
And right. And so we get back, and after a while, after several days, a bus takes us down all the way to Milano. To Milan. We go through the center of town, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And here we are, you know, with our eyes peeled open, and we go into a DP camp on Cinque Unioni, Via dei Unioni Cinque, that's the address, in the middle of that beautiful center of town. And again, full of people there. So the first several nights I slept on pebble stones, you know, in the courtyard. There was a big courtyard, you know. And after a while, some people managed to leave, so I got into a room. When I write the book, I had a beautiful room. Too bad that I had to share it with 100 others. And we had with bunks, you know, wooden-made bunks. Mm-hmm. And we got some, American Army blankets. So we're able to staple them on for some privacy, you know, one on top of the other and so on. So, and that's how we stayed. The first thing we did is manage to register with the American Council. And from then on, all you can do is wait. And the worst part in the DP camps was boredom, because there's nothing to do, you know. And the worst, and the other thing is that you have no assurances that you'll ever make it. It could be a day, a month, a year, 2, 3, 5, or ever. And so I found early that there was a school, called ORT, the initials ORT. It stood for, it's an abbreviation for transliteration actually, of Organization for Rehabilitation and Training. So they opened up schools like for electricians, for mechanics, for radio people, for carpenters, you know. So obviously I joined the electricians school. Mm-hmm. realized that there's nothing for me to learn. I mean, there's just basics, you know. So what I've done instead is I went to that school, to the office, the main office, and I started reading books on my own, math and physics, algebra, geometry and physics, electricity and mechanics and so on, and doing some drafting for them. And a while, and after that course is over, I took another course in motor winding. What do you do? I mean, either that or, you know, nothing, you know. And of course, I learned the language in no time, you know, being that I spoke Romanian at the time, and I spoke Italian and
English?
No English.
Yeah.
Right? No. And of course, then fortunately, it took a couple of years, I guess, that the ORT decided to open up, which is a trade school, decided to open up their first college level institute. And they're going to open it up in Geneva, Switzerland, outside of Geneva. Why Geneva? Because the World ORT Organization was located in Geneva together with the League of Nations at the time, the Red Cross at the time, you know, and so on. So, and they asked to apply for the people to apply. So I applied, and it took quite a while. And then they called me in and told me that, my big surprise, there were 400 applicants throughout Italy, just throughout Italy alone. They accepted 2.
Oh my God.
They accepted me and another guy, a friend of mine.
Oh boy, you are a child.
So I mean, I write the book, that was the second happiest day of my life. You know. And a while later, you know, they supplied me with papers. The papers are, of course, it says stateless. That's where I'm from.
Yeah.
That's my nationality, stateless. But it was, you know, stamped with a visa, you know, to go there to study. And so I went there, and my life changed completely. I'm an international student with a beautiful building in a small village on the lake, Lake Le Mans, Lake Genève. Beautiful. About 100 yards or so from the French border, you know, the French part of Switzerland. And the institute, nice building. I mean, they give you food and board and teaching and everything, you know. So, and of course, they speak only one language, French. There's 63 boys from almost as many countries. I refer to it as mini United Nations. There were 2 from us, from Italy. That later on there came another kid from Italy. It was 3. There were several from Poland. There were 2 from Belgium. 2 from Belgium. 1 from Holland. 1 from Rio de Janeiro. 2 from Morocco. Now these people, their mother tongue is French. And here we got to compete with people whose mother tongue is French and studying engineering. If you don't think that's tough. And yet all these professors that came from the nearby colleges, you know, from Geneva, they all spoke several languages. And during break, you can speak, you speak German, speak Italian, speak, you know. During class, there's only one language. You know, within 6 months, every single one spoke French. Every one of us. You know. Within 6 months, my mom, we got a letter from my parents. You better come home because the visas are here. And if you're not coming, we're not going.
So they were still in
Italy, the DP
Italy.
camps, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So here I am, you know, I was hoping that I'll never be again a DP camps again. I figured I'll be a white collar worker for the rest of my life. I don't want to be an electrician or, you know. And so unfortunately I go back, and now I have to talk I come back, and unfortunately I find out there's only 2 visas for my mom and dad. because the American Council had it formally, officially, that I'm studying, I'm a student in Switzerland. So I got it, so I went immediately and said, oh, wait a minute, I want to go with, that was a temporary thing and so on. So now I talked in my parents to go without me. Imagine that, And imagine the day when the ship leaves and I'm staying there and watching in tears and it's raining out. And I came back and I waited another 6 or 9 months till I got back. And at the age of 19, penniless, that's not true, I had $20 in my pocket. With very little English and no formal education, I came to America. Came to America, and my goal was to get an education. Well, the first thing is, my parents were there, so I went to them, and they were in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And of course, because I tried to cut it short, we went on a ship. It was called Maria C, that line. And there was a semi-mercantile vessel. So there were like 13 refugees, immigrants, and the rest of them were just, there was just, merchandise. So it started off in Geneva, and by the time we got there, it was 23 days. Never heard of it. We had a storm and it was going back, and it stopped off, of course, at the various ports, to unload and offload. So as a consequence, because they were so late, they decided to stop off in Baltimore. So consequently, my port of entry was Baltimore instead of New York. I came in, I have $20, I have a $20 bill. I come in and I talk to the immigration guy and I say, my parents are in Brooklyn, how do I get there? He says, why don't you wait till I do all my duties here on board the ship? And he's got a car, I'll take you over to the railroad station. Took me to the railroad station, I bought a ticket, I think it was like $6, $7 or something like that, and change. And I get to Grand Central Station in New York. Are you familiar with New York? You've been in New York? Okay. I come in there, and I go and I take a cab, and I give my parents' address, and I pay them like $2.50 or something like that. So at the end of it, I think I ended up like with $7 or $8, and that's when I came to America. First thing I did is I immediately looked for a job. I got a job. I just went from place to place. I'm an electrician. I want work. I can do, my vocabulary of 2,000 words or so, how much, thank you, where is, I want work, So finally somebody gave me a job without giving me a job. And I would say, I'll take you in to help. And I promised to get you into the electricians union. And once you're in the electricians union, you're gonna make lots of money. And don't take out the Social Security, I don't want any, because you're not my employee. So it started on Wednesday, and on Friday he came in and he gave me three $5 bills. He says, here is pocket money, not salary, not his employee. And the next week he gave me 4 times 5. Yeah, and after a couple of weeks, it worked like a dog, So the other people were saying, you're a fool. He'll never get you into the. Why should he do that? I mean, if he does, indeed, you'll be making much more money. So I quit and I I got a job on a television assembly line, where you sit with the TV sets. In those days, TVs were made in America.
Right.
Now nothing is made in America.
Westinghouse?
That's the quote. That's the quote. Somebody. You know what I'm referring to? No.
Not sure.
No, I'm referring to Trump.
Oh.
Nothing is made in America anymore.
Yeah.
So they come in upside down, and I'm given a resistor and a capacitor and a couple of wires, and that's my job.
What company was it from?
It was Air King. It doesn't even exist anymore. It was Air King. And what they've done is, so I worked, in fact, if you got to go to the bathroom, you got to call the supervisor to take your place. You're on a machine, like Charlie Chaplin, where you're doing that continuously. And I worked there till before Christmas. Before Christmas, they'll lay you off. And they say, you come back New Year's, we'll hire you back. This way they don't have to pay you for Christmas and New Year's. And then I found a job with Free Transformer Company, and I worked with that company for many years. What I did basically is I started off working there, and I went to school. First thing I did is, my intent is to get an education. So I went to CCNY, City College of New York, to talk to the director of admission. And I showed proudly my papers in French, that I've studied at the Central Institute of Art in Geneva, Switzerland. And she says, look, I know that you have the knowledge, but you can't get into college. You need a high school diploma. I say, I don't have a high school diploma. I said, tell you what, I'll make you a non-matriculated student. Well, my vocabulary at the time did not have the word non-matriculated or matriculated. So I asked her, what does that mean? So it says $9 a credit, and you need 15 credits, B or better, and then you're become, I'd say quickly, 9 times 15. Right. Can't do that. She says, we'll make you a special student. Like, I said, what's that? She says, $5 a credit. I don't have $75. Now, I could have easily gone to my cousins, and I asked them, would you lend me $75? I promised them. I didn't come to America to do that. I did not borrow a cent. In fact, as soon as I started working as an engineer, I sent a check to the company that paid for my voyage to come to the United States. I mean, I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud to be an American, and I came to be an American and to contribute, and not to be a freeloader, or to wave a Mexican flag or a Russian flag, or better yet, right? So what she suggested then is that you, since you have the knowledge, she says, go to high school and tell them that you want to take the last sequence of every course. And New York State has such a thing as Regents exams, state exams. No matter what your grades or no matter what school you come from, to get to college, you got to take the Regents exams. And then take the Regents. So I did that. So I worked for 75 cents an hour, a whole day. At night I went to school. And I went to school and I took Geometry 2, Algebra 2, Physics 2. I never took one, and on. And so, and English 5, that was the first, and that was a disaster. English 5, they were teaching at the time Shakespeare. And I handed a paper, obviously what you do is you read a play and you critique, you tell them you know what you're talking about, and I get back with a big F. And I plead with him, I say, why an F? And he says, well, didn't I understand the play? Oh yes, you understood, why an F? This is an English class, not just a Shakespeare class. Well, to make it short, I ended up with a D for the class in English 5 and English 6. And honestly, I don't believe that I deserved the D either. But just seeing how hard I worked, how much I tried, at that time. So, and took the Regents, and the Regents were all in the 90s, mid-90s, high 90s, So a year later, in 2 semesters, I made up the whole high school. And I go back to the same woman, and I show her the papers, and I say, well, can I go in now? She says, well, not so fast. I said, well, that's what you told me. He says, yes. Tell you what, I'll let you take the entrance exams. So I went and I took the entrance exams. And a time later, she calls me back, and she tells me, she was an elderly lady, she's been there forever. And she says, in all the years, my experience, I've never seen such bad results when it came to English and social studies and so on. So I picked myself up and says, please sit down. On the other hand, she says, I've never seen anything like that in physics and math and science. And she extends her hand and says, congratulations, you're in. That's how I got into high school. That's how I got to college, I mean. At college, well, to make it short, I mean, in college I made, and I still was working all the time, was working Saturdays, Sundays, and normally college you have a light program normally on Tuesdays and Thursdays because it's all kind of activities and so on. So I managed to work one of these days also at free transfer, a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there, and so on. And in college, of course, I met my wife, Annette, and she was a mechanical engineer. And she wrote that paper, interesting. So we were introduced by a chemical engineer. We're not, engineer, student, not engineers, we were students at the time. And so we were normally going out meeting for lunch. We never had classes together. I made sure that we don't have classes together. So we going out to lunch, to the Greasy Spoon or to the cafeteria. So she, during Christmas vacation, during the New Year's holidays, I get a phone call from her, and she tells me I got tickets to the opera she knew that I love opera because in Italy I've learned the language, I've learned opera, I learned music, I loved it, So she got, she's pointing to me, the time is going on. So she had tickets to the Met Opera, to Aida. And that was our first date, formal date.
Wow.
So in order to get these tickets,
I was 18.
she was 18 and I was 24 at the time. I was older than the average bear, because of where I come from. And she, during the holidays, she went to college. She knew I'm electrical engineering. She knew my first name, Robert. She knew my last name with an F. And she knew I'm graduating in 56. So she went and she looked me up and she got my phone and she called me up. So then she wrote that years later, she wrote this article saying, I did not know his name. So that sort of started. Of course, we got married after after I finished school.
Found out what you named.
Finished school. And I was doing well at work, because I was trying harder than everybody else and was more mature and more serious than everybody else. So my first job, I ended up at Curtis Wright, designing flight simulators to train pilots. So that was sort of the beginning of my career. And I spent there 2 years. We were told specifically at that time, don't spend more than 2 years on a job because you don't know whether that's the best job there is. What's more, you'll go to the next job, you're going to get 10% raise. And that's exactly what I did. So I did that, and then I went and spent 2 years developing a RO, a radar operator simulator for the F-101B, for the for the MG-13 fire control system. Still remember that, built by Hughes. And of course, all that time, I went at night to school to Columbia University. So I got my master's at Columbia University, and as soon as I got my master's, they offered me a job at General Dynamics Astronautics in San Diego. And I come in, and I was delighted, driving my brand new Plymouth Belvedere with no air conditioning across the desert with a 9 months sun. I thought that I'll lose out of heat during that time. And we made it, of course. And
you were married to us.
Oh yeah, of course we were married. So so over there they gave me the first job they gave me there is to head up a study activity, a lunar guidance study activity. It was called Lunar Guidance of Military Vehicles, something like that. So after that study was over, which was about a year and a half, close to 2 years, the report appears, because the result of the study is a report, and it goes to the government library, to the Army library, Ostia, I think it's called. And once it appeared, I have a copy of it here, and it carries my name. I started getting phone calls from North American Aviation, from Downey, because they just obtained the Apollo program to put a man on the moon. And with my knowledge, I mean, so made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So although I hated, especially Annette, she was crying, I don't want to leave San Diego. And I made a promise, I'll bring it back to San Diego. I kept my promise, I brought it back 30 years later. So at North American Aviation, they hired me strictly for the knowledge of guidance and control, and doing studies and writing proposals and bringing in new business and that arena. And so
And that was
I was doing
Downey?
that was in Downey.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, I was doing studies. In fact, I started off with a study. I remember doing an anti-missile missile. How do you converge? With the right. So my original equations there, but then the Apollo program, once it started going a little more, they needed to build a flight simulator, the Apollo mission simulator. And they, being that the program is more than $1 million in value, their rules are the CCNR, what are the rules of the company, are that anything more than $1 million needs a separate evaluation from outside the Apollo program. An independent evaluation. So there's 2 evaluations. So it doesn't get, sort of,
So
I bought it, or, give it to my buddy, or who knows what,
Okay, yeah.
So they realized that I had that experience on my resume, so they pulled me in to do that. And after we led the contract was given to, we recommended Link Aviation, and upstate New York in Binghamton. And that was a big mistake, and it was against my will, because I knew that Curtiss Wright is a better company. But you're evaluating the proposal, you're not evaluating it. Their proposal was awful. Their proposal was, hey, look at all the things we've done, and we have patents, and we're going to do it. Whereas they gave you a whole story, and so we gave them the contract. So next thing you know, they yanked me out from what I was doing, and they put me in charge of running the Apollo mission simulator, running the contractor, and providing him data, and doing data design reviews and so on. Well, another rule, I guess, of the Apollo program was, excuse me, any major subsystem or system on the Apollo required an astronaut to be dedicated to know it upside down. I mean, they have to know everything, but so they assign a man by the name of come on, no, I'm thinking of the first guy.
Charlie Bassett.
Of Charlie Bassett. Well, Charlie Bassett was a pilot, a test pilot, and so on. Flew a mission and a test mission in St. Louis and killed himself. Got killed. So next thing you know is they bring in another young fella by the name of Neil Armstrong. This name I don't forget. I'm sure that everybody's heard of Neil Armstrong. So here is my name to fame. So he spent many hours in my office, and we went to design reviews together and did all that. And to make it short, after the design is pretty much settled, I no longer am interested in it. My forte is pretty much to define analyze, organize, manage. I'm not interested in the hardware and nuts and bolts. So I was looking around for another job.
Was this a fixed base simulator, or did it actually?
No, fixed base.
Okay.
Fixed base. Fixed base simulator.
So it's just all.
But it had it had the orbit determination, the attitude control, pointing. I mean, you name it. Look at stars. Look at use the section and telescope, and the works. Right. So I decided to get another job. That's enough. No longer interested in it. So I found out that at that time, the Surveyor was just launched by Hughes Aircraft Company, successfully launched. That's the first unmanned soft lander on the moon. To prove the concept that, number one, you can soft land on the moon, and two, to find pretty much a window for where the Apollo astronauts are going to land eventually. Mm-hmm. So I called up there, and they asked me to come over. I called somebody that I met at Curtis Wright. He was a PhD type who was coming there summers, working. And Dr. Chang, and I say, Dick, remember me? Oh yeah. I told him what I'm doing. Do you think there's room for me? He says, look, we successfully landed one. We're laying off people, but people like you we always need. So I came in and I interviewed his boss, and interviewed the vice president, and of course they gave me on the spot. They gave me an offer, and they put me in charge of the as a assistant department manager of the trajectories, orbit and trajectory analysis for the Surveyor. And at the same time, what they've assigned me separately, being that there was a manager already there, is to really concentrate on seeing whether there's a way of picking up the Surveyor and translating it off the lunar surface. Now, it was not designed to do that, but there was no reason why we felt that you shouldn't be able to do it. And being that it has gyros, the gyros will be freezing at whatever altitude you're in. All you have to do is slide the engines, and it's going to go in that direction. Stop the engines, and it's going to come down. And that was my baby. So we just developed trajectories for that, and followed it. And I stayed kept on briefing JPL, who was managing for NASA the program, and eventually I did it successfully, and that was not a cap in my hat. and after that, the Surveyor, there was not much there to do. So my boss, who was the systems manager, of all the systems, disappeared. What we refer to it as in the black. Another program, and that's we knew was highly classified and so on. A short time later, I get a phone call from him, from Jim Cloud, and says, he says, Bob, I'll send you a bunch of papers I want you to fill out. These are security papers, please fill them out. Hangs up. I finally get them. There's like I think, and I start looking at it and say, forget it. I'm born in Russia, they'll never clear me, I put them aside. Well, a couple of months later, I get a call from Jim. I didn't see the papers across my desk. I say, Jim, you didn't see them because I didn't send them. I say, don't you know where I was born? So he says, Bob, will you ever do something you're told to do? So I finally, yes, Jim, I got it. I filled out the paper, and in 2 months I got clearance. Normally it took a minimum of 4 to 6 months. And then I find out that after all, they knew exactly. I came to the United States, I was 19. I left Russia when I was 14, 16. Hey, come on, So I got on that, and over there they put me in charge of, we were developing now we can talk about the spy satellite, We're developing a first satellite, I think, to be able to detect incoming missiles, primarily from Russia, to watch the Russian sites, and to determine whether it's a test missile or whether it's the real thing, and at the same time, you know, to also see whether we can detect telemetry and actually photography and, you know, all the good stuff, you know, that we aren't supposed to talk about. Well, but it's been 60 years, 50 years since then, or whatever, you know.
What was the project called?
Well, they didn't have a name, it was 7-Eleven.
Oh,
I mean,
must be secret. I haven't heard that.
Exactly, those programs did not have names, right? And so in there, I was put responsibility for some major developments in there. You know, like the key, you know, the equations for orbit determination, for pointing. There's no sense of having a spacecraft if you don't know where it is.
Yeah.
If you know where it is, if you want to point, there's no sense having it if you can't point it somewhere, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she's dying there, I gotta go. So at any rate, I'll make it short. So after that, what I've done is so I was developing that, and after that I was doing other things, and because I felt that I didn't want to stay in the black so much, because I wanted the freedom of talking to my wife about it and traveling, and, you know, so finally, you know, I told them I'm quitting. They wouldn't believe it. After 11 years of a manager there, and then with all the future, and, you know, and at the age of 50, and that helped me, I think.
It was 1978.
1978, okay, so it's, I was already 58 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, you're nuts, you know. So I went and I sent a resume to DR.DAVE, and they immediately gave me an offer, because even though it's a highly classified program, they knew exactly what I was doing. I was surprised.
So you
And over
worked
that-
you worked at the
What?
DR.DAVE building on
Yeah.
what is it, Marine Avenue?
Where?
In what is it, Hawthorne?
At Hughes?
No, at TRW.
Yeah, at DR.DAVE, yeah.
Yeah.
DR.DAVE, I was at One Space Park.
It was 48, or 48.
Yeah, I was 48, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, I was 48, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
So after 11 years there, I went there, and again, they put me in charge of a variety of studies and new business, so on. And my final, the last one, was the Gamma Ray Observatory. That was my spacecraft from very beginning to end. That's to detect gamma rays.
Mm-hmm.
And I was went to Washington to brief the staffers and to keep the money in the budget, and I told them, look, gammas are the most energetic particle. Think of it that when we're detecting, which means they were created by the most energetic event, like the Big Bang.
Yeah.
So by collecting them, we're basically viewing the creation, evidencing the creation of the universe. Don't you think it's worth the money? We kept it, it was successful. After that, you know, I quit at the age of 55. I just waited for my early retirement, and I left there because we ran a business already, which started by Annette, by my wife, and we ran it together. There was in software engineering, and we developed the program, and it was also in logistics primarily. Again, we dealt only with the military. That's all we knew, the government and so on. So. And,
Deep pockets.
and the interesting part of it is, I have to mention that on the 130th anniversary of the birth of the creation of the ORT, of that ORT organization, of that they held their anniversary at the United Nations, and they invited me to speak there.
Oh, wow.
So that was, in fact, I had 25 books signed and handed over to all these ambassadors there. And so that was a big feather in my hat. And I've been speaking all over since. And the point is, every time I speak, I feel that I'm keeping my promise to my mom to tell the world what happened to innocent people. And hopefully it'll never happen again. And thank you for the opportunity. We have 4 children. 3 of them have doctors. And one's an engineer like my wife also. also working on government activities and space activities.
Well,
And I'm very proud to be an American and to be able to
Well,
contribute to America.
proud to have you here.
Thank you very much.
We would like you on the other side.
Thank you.
Okay.